Okay, well, let's pivot to. It seems like another theme coming in through the live questions is related to long-term care type of things.
All right, I
Maybe
got
we can try to go in order a little bit on some of these long-term care questions next.
okay. And if I'm looking away, it's because I'm looking at a screen that has questions as they're coming in. We're not looking at YouTube live because there's a 7 second delay and it'll drive us crazy. But Brianna, Amber, Elizabeth, they're helping organize questions and shooting them into our Teams channel.
I thought you
So
were watching Jim Cramer.
who's watching Kramer?
I thought you were when you were looking away.
No, I'm watching Power Lunch. That Josh Brown is my hero. Oh my! We can do a whole podcast on that kind of BS, but that's another world. All right, we have here Bill. How about discussing ways to handle long-term care? He's 65 now. When health conditions, in parents, chronic illnesses, prevent us from qualifying for long-term care insurance. Does episode 115 cover this topic? I don't know the episodes by number, but wait.
Well, let's talk about it now. I think we did some of those long-term care episodes did discuss this, although maybe not so explicitly. But yes, traditional long-term care insurance is the hardest to qualify for. And if you've developed chronic conditions, you're probably going to struggle to qualify for traditional long-term care insurance. So what other options do you have? Some of the new hybrid policies are easier. So a hybrid life insurance with long-term care or annuity with long-term care. They have underwriting, but it may be easier to qualify than with traditional insurance. That might be something to look at. Or just simply, if you're looking for more of a protection-based approach, an idea we talked about that's not perfect, but it's use a deferred income annuity that's going to start income later in life, because that will approximate the time you may need more funds for long-term care. So whether it's the qualified longevity annuity contract inside of your IRA that you can put in up to, it's this year, I think with Secure Act 2.0, they changed it. It's now increasing for inflation. So I think $205,000 this year as a premium. And then you can have income begin at age 80 to 85, just trying to approximate that's when I may need some more spending power to cover long-term care. That can be an option. That's kind of the getting through all the potential safe ways to fund long-term care. So beyond that, it's just a general matter of self-funding. And there were some other questions asking about how to invest for self-funding. So we may come back, put a pin in that for a moment. And then, of course, the Medicaid possibility as well, that if you do get into a situation where you've spent down your other resources, at some point you may be able to qualify for Medicaid, not Medicare. And we stress that a lot in the ARC on long-term care, but Medicaid, once you've depleted other resources, which how that's defined varies state to state. But
Yeah, and that could be I've got good news and bad news kind of realization.
Uh-huh. So there's more on long-term care that have been coming in live.
Okay,
here.
let me scroll down then.
While we're on this theme. Let's see. Oh yeah. Oh, we did talk about long-term care.
We have one from Mike. Did we address the Mike one? Is having enough guaranteed income to cover all expenses minus long-term care costs, is that being overly conservative?
To cover like all.
I'm just reading the question straight up.
Longevity plus lifestyle, your entire retirement budget covered with guaranteed income, except unprotected long-term care.
It's not a long-term care question. I just saw long-term care in there, so I just kind of my eyes went to it.
We can finish that one while we're on it. The safety first approach. Well, if you view all your expenses as really being essential and not flexible and not discretionary, you could approach it from the direction of having everything covered with guaranteed income sources. But that is a rather conservative approach. The safety first approach generally tries to break the retirement budget into essential expenses and discretionary expenses, and then looks to have reliable income sources to fund the essential expenses, and allows for a more diversified investment approach to cover discretionary expenses where you've got flexibility to make cuts. If you don't have any flexibility to make any cuts, then and you have that safety first commitment orientation, then you may be looking to potentially use guaranteed income for all expenses. But I think that would not be such a common approach to take.
Okay. And wait, all of these that I answered, just as an FYI, I'm giving them a thumbs up on the Teams channel
Okay.
as a shortcut that we've addressed it.
Okay. Yeah, there is another one here on this theme.
From Jeff, I think, right?
So, dementia care, are elders put on streets to be homeless or put in subpar care units if they run out of money and have no family to care for them? Well, that's where Medicaid kicks in. Now, Medicaid, the quality of care through Medicaid, it's not, if you can self-pay and you can pay a higher amount, you may get higher quality care. But Medicaid still does a reasonable job. So this may be a little bit pessimistic in its outlook on what happens to individuals who cannot self-pay. However, with the demographic situation in the United States, more and more people over age 65 relative to younger ages, we do face constraints that there's just simply not going to be enough people to work in long-term care facilities to provide that sort of care. There's estimates that by 2050, the number of Alzheimer's patients may triple in the United States. And if we just simply don't have enough people to care for them all, and we haven't otherwise invented other technologies, which that's a whole nother angle. Maybe robots will take care of everyone at some point. But
Wow,
barring barring that though,
HAL 2000.
Yes, everything else being the same, you may prefer to be able to pay for your care, either self-pay or through insurance, relative to having to rely on Medicaid. Hopefully we never get to a point where Medicaid is really subpar in terms of what it can support. But there's a potential risk for that.
Wait, there was we talked about it in the podcast. Maybe you want to talk about it. Like, is it better to be in a care facility while you're on Medicare before it flips to, if
Not
you know,
Medicare, but
sorry, before you have, while you have money, and then, eventually you may need Medicaid?
Yes, that may be helpful to get, even if having a small insurance policy, the care coordinator benefit that's common with those policies may help you get situated in a facility. They may know about the rules of that facility better. What happens when you can no longer self-pay? Do you get pushed to a different part of the facility that may not be as glamorous, that sort of thing? But yes, if you can enter the facility before claiming Medicaid, in many cases, that may lead to a better experience than if you already have to apply to Medicaid before entering the facility. And again, Medicaid, the rules vary by state. Some states allow for more allowances, especially if there's a spouse. Other states, you really do have to be destitute before qualifying for Medicaid. So the rules vary by state, but Medicaid is the resource that once you're deemed to no longer be able to afford to pay for your care, Medicaid will step in and pay for long-term care once you qualify through the needing help with at least 2 activities of daily living and so forth.
I'll say this, and I think this is my own personal situation, and the caveat is anecdote is not evidence, right? I hate the fact that Bob is the one that first said that, by the way, and it stuck with me. I wish it wasn't Bob. Yeah, but I said, damn it, he's got me, man. But no, it's very true. It's an awesome phrase. Anecdote is not evidence, so understand that, right? But for my own situation, my dad is not. Go on.
It is evidence, actually. That's
well, but okay, it's a sample of one. All right, shut up. Yes, thank you, Wade. Thank you, Wade.
There you go. You have an out on that.
Yeah, but it doesn't meet the parameters of the central limits theorem, so I can't use it in a stats, whatever. All right. Maybe if I had 28 samples, I can make that claim. But going back to this, look, my dad is on Medicaid. He's in a facility in Miami, and it's a great one. It's actually they treat him. He's like 96. My dad's on the older side. He's like 96. Men don't usually live that long, especially from his generation. So he's like the mascot over there. But they treat him great, and he's Medicaid. So it just depends on how you look for it. Now, is he in dementia care? Yeah, he's effectively in a perpetual slipstream at this point. My mom she's going to transition into Medicaid very soon, but she was able to get into an assisted living facility in Miami, and I'm very fortunate. They treat her like family there. They love her like a family member, and it's a matter of just doing a little bit of due diligence and making sure that you know the folks that are there. But where there's a will, there's a way around that stuff. Now, unfortunately, it takes work. It's not a matter of just picking up a phone and calling the local services. It's who do you know that knows who, like anything in life. But there is, you dig deep enough and you could find a solution. Now, the caveat there is that's Miami. That's a city with 5 million, greater Miami, 6 million people. So it's different if you're in a town of 10,000, right? So I don't know, with regards to is everything, all is lost? I don't think so. I think you'd be surprised on the upside what's available.
Very good. Yeah. And then actually Jeff pointed out when I was trying to come up with a list of long-term care funding mechanisms a few moments ago, I missed mentioning the reverse mortgage. So what about a reverse mortgage in place to address long-term care needs? Absolutely. Now it does need a caveat. Once you leave your home, you're no longer eligible to borrow from the reverse mortgage. So you can't necessarily use it to pay for institutional living. But people want to age in place. They want to age in their homes. And a reverse mortgage can be a great way to pay for in-home care. There was just in the newspaper this weekend, and I can't remember, I read the Dallas Morning News and the New York Times. One of the two was talking about a survey that, again, emphasizes this point.
Wait, you read the New York Times?
And the Dallas Morning News.
All right. Later, everybody. I don't care.
It was talking about how just this point that it's already well established, but another survey, another data point. People want to age in their homes. They don't want to move to institutions. This article was more about aging in place, to build in the ability to have a wheelchair accessible entrance or have a bathing facility on the first floor. But the same concept then also applies to long-term care, paying for in-home care. People don't want to move to institutions. And so if you treat your home equity as a funding source to help support staying in your home and supporting in-home care in your home, long-term care in your home, absolutely, that's another great potential approach. Not even, we're talking about when you can't qualify for traditional insurance, but you may also look at this as an alternative to traditional insurance as well.
Yeah, you've said it, man. Look, a big picture, you have to think of assets are fungible. Assets are fungible. Long-term care, comes at a cost. If you can use the equity that you have in place and turn that into liquid money, why not? Right? Assets are fungible, and you should take that sort of agnostic view on things.
Okay.
All right, Wade, we got about 5 minutes left on the hour. We're going to answer all the questions that are here and the ones of the write-ins. It's just, this is kind of like a more natural rhythm right now. And so we probably got time for one more.
Well, I think we booked 2 hours for this, actually.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was thinking podcast. Oh, then we're good.
You're in such a hurry.
Yeah. Then we're good.
But
okay.
For anyone who is listening in, and this is going to get longer than you can handle, I guess on YouTube you can watch the whole recording later, but we will also distribute this as podcast episodes in the coming weeks as well. So you'll have a chance to catch the whole conversation if you do need to leave at any point.
Okay, so I've got one from Bill that's kind of, are we done with
Yeah, I think we've covered the long-term care related ones, at least the live questions.
Let me see if there's any quick ones. Let me look at the Excel sheet where we have those. Give me a second. Income bridge, glide path. No, the closest thing would be the HSA question.
Yeah, that's not a long-term care one.
No, it's not. It just has the word health.
There was a question about how to invest your long-term care assets.
Oh, yeah, okay, you're right. It was...
Where was that on the list?
I think it was in the Excel. I think it was the last one in the Excel. While you're looking for it, the row 16.
Yeah, I'll read that question.
Okay.
Yeah, well, we're on the long-term care theme. So, in a recent episode of the podcast, you mentioned setting aside if you're self funding long term care instead of buying an insurance product. For example, Wade shared his family's amount of 500K.
You sure it
How
wasn't
would
5 million?
that would be tough. How would you recommend someone invest that portion of their money during retirement? I realize everyone's situation is different, but do you have any general guidelines or rules of thumb? Thank you. Okay. So
You looking at me?
this is fundamentally a tough question, and it gets partly into, so on the one hand, there are those individuals who have the more technical liquidity mindset, which is you just have a big pot of assets that you'll draw from as needed for different expenses. And you're really thinking about, well, what's the asset allocation for my overall pot of assets? If you're taking that approach, you're not really thinking about this question in the same manner, because you're not going to carve something out to be your long-term care reserve assets. You're just going to have this big pot of assets that you draw from. Now, if you have more of a true liquidity mindset, that is where you start to earmark, okay, this asset is for this purpose, I need to invest it. That other asset is for that other purpose. And so then you are thinking about the present value of my future long-term care. If 500K may be more like the future value, but the present value, hopefully you don't need, well, depending on your age, but you may not need that much set aside at the start of retirement. That being said, suppose it is $300,000 to $500,000 that you've said, okay, this is my reserve asset earmarked for long-term care. How do I invest it? It's a hard question to answer because you fundamentally don't know when you're going to need to tap into that. You could have an accident and need the money tomorrow. It may be 30 years before you need it. You may never need it. And so I think that does make it harder to follow the sort of idea that, well, I might need this money tomorrow, so I have to invest it conservatively. That's a lot of money to have on the sidelines for potentially the next 30 years. And to the extent that it is more likely you do have a long runway before these funds are needed, I don't think you necessarily want to invest it overly conservatively. You may have your general, some sort of cash bucket that may not just be for the long-term care, but in general, I want the next year of expenses in cash, something like that. Then you can say, well, if I do have the long-term care event, I've got that cash ready. But the rest of my long-term care reserve assets, I do want to hold in a more diversified investment approach, just because the reality is it may be a long time before you need to tap into that. And if you hold it in cash throughout the entire retirement, you're potentially sacrificing a lot of return on that asset. So I guess it's not a rule of thumb or anything, but I would lean away from investing it too conservatively if it doesn't seem like you're necessarily going to need to tap into those funds soon.
Yeah.
You agree?
Yes. No, I mean, look, there's a lot of variables. I think the first one is what you said. Where do you stand on liquidity? True liquidity versus technical liquidity. Do you want it earmarked, or do you want it inside of a big pot where other things you can draw from? That kind of thing. There's no right or wrong answer. It's where your preference is for that. And then from there is, what the allocation should be somewhat of a Goldilocks allocation, not too aggressive, not too conservative when it comes for that aspect of the money. It's going to be probably a lot more difficult if you use an aggregate allocation approach, to determine, okay, where is the sliver coming from for long-term care eventually. And so to keep yourself honest from a behavioral standpoint, you probably want to have, you can look at the household allocation, but you want to probably have it into some sort of separate account, if anything, just for behaviorally being able to see that and to give you solace in terms of, if anything happens, this is where it will come from. That's the only other caveat I think I could add, Wade, other than your answer, which there's only so many ways you can say what you said, right?
Mm-hmm. All right.
All right. All righty.
Okay, back to the live questions here.
Oh, we got some more? Okay, hang on.
But there's a couple. These are maybe a little bit miscellaneous ones. Let me see if there's any
Okay, I can do the one about the fee only planner because that's kind of an
Okay,
odd one.
sure. Uh-huh.
While you looking for other ones, Alex, excuse my ignorance. Are you a fee only planner? I suspect you mean McLean. We used to be in NAPFA. We used to be the which is the fee only association up until 3 years ago, Wade, something like that. The reality is we moved away from it simply because if you look at our writings, look, we do believe contractual income has a role in the portfolio. We've always actually believed that, and we would refer out a lot of that business, frankly. And we would tell a client to come in, and the financial plan required some sort of annuity because that's what that person wanted, and we would refer it out. From a logistical standpoint, it becomes dicey because they're making it. The person would make a new relationship with somebody else, and we didn't know how they would be treated for that transaction and the like. And so we just ended up doing that in house from a workflow standpoint. It was just much easier, and you add to that everything that we've written on about contractual income and how there is a role for certain folks, and how we talked about the RISA, which is effectively what we find is 2/3 of the population wants some role of contractual income. We were being stupid, frankly, internally ourselves, not to consider that as part of the purview of our services. And so within that, we let go of our fee only piece. Now, the underlying question to all of that could be, I don't know how you're asking it, but just for folks listening in, is okay, your advice is conflicted. Look, everyone has conflicts of interest with regards to compensation. I think the key is transparency and allowing that transparency to take hold. I mean, Michael Finke just did a study on fee only advisors and how they actually, more often than not, mistakenly, I think, ask people to claim Social Security early. That's financial planning wise. That's not a great outcome. Why? Because that leads to greater investable assets. Greater investable assets, you can charge on those, right? From an AUM standpoint. And so I'm not a big fan of folks that wave this banner of moral superiority based on, this is this model, and this model is significantly better than that model. I don't think so. I think actually we hang our hat on transparency, and we hang our hat on the preference of how that individual wants to source retirement income based on the RISA. And we go from there, frankly, in terms of how our recommendations are. And so whether you're asking it this way or not, the answer is we let go of that because that doesn't allow us to actually really put the client first in terms of what their best interests are of how they want to source retirement income. I don't believe that one compensation model is better than the other when it comes to things like that, simply because even if you take the annuity, right? Okay, there is a higher upfront cost for the client, right? But that will probably, if you compare that on an apples to apples to an AUM based model, after 6-7 years, it's a break even. From that standpoint, because the AUM, you're probably paying 1% a year, right, in perpetuity, for that particular issue. And so, frankly, our clients are with us. The good news is we have clients for a long time. When we don't, it's because there's a death or there's a divorce or some sort of event that wasn't necessarily a nice thing. And so what I'm getting at is it's more than 7 years. It's usually 15, 20, 25 years that we have clients. And so even from that alone, you can make the case which is better, right? But I'm not even coming at it from that. I'm really coming at it from that. If you function from the standpoint of what's in the client's best interest based on how they want to source retirement income, and you're transparent about how you came up with that, I'm fine with that. Wade, just because Wade gets hit a lot with this, and maybe I'm going off on a little bit of a tangent, but there was something on the podcast or somewhere, right, Wade, where you were questioned like, well, it's obvious. Oh, that article that was written, right? It's obvious that Wade is going to recommend this. Yeah, because you're a shill for insurance companies, Yeah, I mean, those are kind of dilettantes that talk about what's going on without really knowing what the hell they're talking about. But Wade, you want to chime in?
So fee-only planners, that's kind of an approximation for investment management and financial planning. Alex mentioned AUM, that's assets under management. charging a percentage of assets to manage the investments, and or there can also be like retainer based or hourly planning fees, that sort of thing. Historically, annuities paid a commission rather than having a fee set, having you pay the fee to the advisor directly. The commission paid the advisor. So that could create conflicts. With retirement, though, it is difficult to ignore annuities, and there are fee-only annuities. A lot of great opportunities in the fee-only annuity space, but because that area is small, there may be 40 fee, well, probably more than 40, but whatever. There's
TPL had
10
like
times as many
44, right? So
commission-based. There's many more commission-based annuity options out there than there are fee-only, and so even though fee-only should be cheaper because they don't have to extract the commission from the annuity, given the higher competition on the commission side, you can find better opportunities there. So just being able to best serve clients, as Alex was explaining, McLean Asset Management shifted away from that NAPFA fee only, kind of arguing fee only is the best model because there's no conflicts, to really trying to be as comprehensive as possible. And that may mean accepting a commission on an annuity sale, but being clear in how that's being transparently done. So fee-based would be the term for what we're talking about here, rather than the term fee only.
all right, and there's a follow-up here. How do you determine if you have enough assets to make it worth engaging a fee-only planner? Right. Ideally, what you'll see is, I think, there's a reason Ken Fisher in his commercials sort of hate annuities, but then the caveat is only call us if you have more than 500 grand to invest.
Well, the other
Right.
caveat is he's willing to pay your surrender charges on annuities, and he's not a charity. So what does
Yeah.
that tell you?
Yeah, exactly. Oh, and add to that, if you have below 500,000, vaya con Dios. What do? Let them eat cake, kind of thing. And that's why annuities can actually be a good solution, because it automates the retirement income. But what I would say to this is, look, an advisor, to run an advisory firm, it costs money, right? And from that vantage point, probably anything below 500,000, which would equate to a 5,000 a year sort of asset management fee, is starting to get dicey for that person. You'll see many established advisors won't go below $1 million, and they're looking at a retainer or AUM of about 2,000. Because sometimes people will say, well, I don't want AUM, I want to pay a retainer. They're just going to back into a retainer. The advisor is going to back into some sort of retainer cost. That's more or less like what the AUM is. So it's kind of a look at the birdie kind of vibe. But when you think it's cost effective, you're probably looking at anywhere from 5 to 10,000 as a minimum. Anyone that charges you less than $5,000 as an advisor is probably starting their firm, and there's nothing wrong with that. You got to start somewhere. I get it, but there's also as a client, there's also that phrase: no one wants to be your first client, and no one wants to be your biggest client. And so there's that yin and yang. But you see that if you're looking at an hourly planner, that's usually more for planning. They may look at your assets and say, I'll charge you just for this amount of time, but those folks in my world are secretly just waiting to turn to AUM advisors. They're just like biding their time. And there it is.
Okay, well, we've got some other questions, but a brand new one that just came in is maybe while we're on the insurance themes briefly. So what are your thoughts on buying whole life insurance for teenage children? You want me to take that one?
Yeah.
So I did get a
Yes.
whole life policy
No.
for myself, and it was explained to me why I should also get them on my children. I did not bite on that. Of course, everyone's situation is different, but the basic logic in favor of getting a permanent life insurance for teenage children is to protect their insurability. If something happens to them and they're no longer insurable, they develop some sort of condition or have an accident, something you want to have so that when they're adults, they have the ability to get life insurance. I kind of figured that was somewhat of a low risk, and so ultimately I was not personally persuaded to buy permanent life or any life insurance on my children. But that being said, if it is something you're concerned about, maybe an option there is just a small policy that has that guaranteed ability to increase it at higher ages.
Okay. Are there any challenges that you see this a lot on TikTok and all that kind of silliness about whole life insurance that it's kind of sold as this panacea to something that it's not really meant to be?
Yeah, so the research I've done is about using whole life insurance in retirement, and it's completely different. You're talking about, you actually wrote it here. There's like infinite banking or invest like the Rockefellers. There's all these different things that are out there. I've never really gone too deep into any of that sort of thing. So that's not a retirement question. That's more how to manage your finances pre-retirement. So,
And for the most part, we think that that's like a bunch of silliness, to be honest with you. You're just lending money to yourself and then charging yourself interest, kind of thing. We don't get into that. All right. What
okay.
else in terms of?
So here's a question you can handle. Okay. I'm about 1.5 years out from retirement. What strategy is recommended to lower risk during this time?
Okay, hang on. Where, just to make sure I see it's from the Excel? Say it again.
That question came from Dan at 12, or I guess 1:33 p.m.
Oh, it was live.
Yeah, one of the live questions.
Okay.
Yeah, there's still some live questions we haven't covered yet.
Oh, Dan. Oh, I see. I'm about 1.5 years from retirement. What strategy is recommended to lower risk during this time? Well, a couple things on risk during this time, right? 5 years before retirement and 5 years into your retirement, you're in the fragile decade, right? And what that means is you can't control what economic cycle you're effectively retiring into. That's the one thing that's out of our control. Well, there's a lot of things out of our control, but that's one of the things that's out of our control. And so this is when you start really giving a sense to, what's going on, because not only are you entering that cycle where your human capital is transferring to investment capital, your investment amount is probably the highest it's ever been. And so from the standpoint of stocks for the long term, that's fine and dandy, but you've already gone into that long term phase, and you don't know what's going to happen in the next few years. And so you may be taking undue risk with the highest investable assets that you've ever had as you're entering an economic cycle that is random, right? And so that's risky. Hence, there's the fragile decade, right? 5 years before, 5 years into. Now, I don't know. I forgot what the actual number is, but it has a the returns during that time period will have a disproportionate effect on your overall success of your retirement plan. In the high 70s, Wade, or something like that? In the high 70s? The R square on the fragile decade and
okay.
Something like that, right?
Something like that. Yeah.
And so there's a flip side. Someone can say, yeah, but it could be up too, right? You can't control that kind of stuff, and I don't want to leave like your retirement to a flip of the coin.
But
so
it goes both ways.
It goes both ways, but
volatility of outcomes both directions.
But you don't want to live 35 years just to have heads instead of tails at the end of that, right? So there's that piece, and really, I would start it off with the retirement income style awareness, which is what you're preparing yourself for, right? You're preparing yourself for retirement. So the first step in retirement, I wholeheartedly believe, I'm going to go out on a limb, Wade wholeheartedly believes this, is take the RISA. It's the first chapter of his book, where he writes about the study that we did on the RISA and how it took off. So you first have to identify how you want to source retirement income. And that's, are you a total return investor? Are you a risk wrap investor? Are you an income protection investor? Are you a time segmentation investor? I'm going to spare anyone going through, the definitions of each. Maybe, Wade, you can do it quickly when I pass it to you. But effectively, you want to know where you stand and how you want to source retirement income. Once you've determined that, you have to pick your strategy before you pick an allocation or whatever. Once you determine that, then you can start moving deck chairs around, right? And, okay, let's just say you end up being total return. Well, you want to ask yourself, what's the allocation that will give me a sustainable withdrawal rate that can withstand the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, right? And you need, to answer your question specifically, if you need to lower your risk, you lower your risk, and it's a stock and bond question at that point. If you're taking the total return, look, bonds within an investment portfolio are there to ballast the risk. Equity is where you absorb the return. The biggest mistakes we see with folks that are total return is they start trying to juice up the dividends. Over the long term, stocks and bonds have a correlation of like in the 30s, right? But during moments of market like craziness, there's a dislocation that takes place, and that correlation breaks. And then stocks and bonds tend to move very high, in a similar manner. So all the diversification benefits got lost, except high credit quality bonds, right? Those are going to be yielding the less, but they kind of provide the ballast during those times. So if you're thinking from a stock equity standpoint and your total return, you obviously increase your allocation to fixed income bonds, right? That's it. High quality bonds. That's how you would play it. If it's time segmentation, you can do kind of two things, because I strongly feel that a rising glide path has a time segmentation quality to it, right? And so you can get an artificially lower allocation in equity than you normally would. Let's say if it's decided based on a plan that, look, when I retire, I think a 60-40 allocation is what I should be, and that's what the analysis show, funded ratio, Monte Carlo, et cetera, right? Once I've retired and I'm well into retirement, well, you're 1.5 years away. You're in that fragile decade. Why don't you begin with 45, 55 portfolio, 45 equity. I'm sorry, 55, 45 portfolio, 55 bonds, 45 equity. And then you just eke it up. Let's do 5 percentage points every year until you land on the 60-40. I think I said it the right way. Did I inverse the stock to bond?
Yeah, you want to get up to 60-40. So
Yeah, I forgot how I said. But the point is,
40%.
if you're naturally going to be 60-40 stock to bonds, then start 40-60. Yeah, I'm just saying that. And then creep your way up. That way, during the fragile decade, you're kind of giving yourself that lower volatility in that portfolio to make sure that you can get in the right way. Another piece of time segmentation is start creating ladders, bond ladders, bucketing strategies, where you have your income covered for the first few years, right? And while you have that income covered, you can let the stock market run a little bit. The expectation is through time diversification that the stock returns are going to be able to replenish the buckets as they empty. But this is why I think it's very similar to a glide path. Because if you look at your aggregate allocation, as soon as you get those cash buckets, think of that as a fixed income allocation, right? Kind of is, right? You're just not like earmarking. You're earmarking it more than just putting in a generalized allocation. So that's another way to go about doing it. The other piece, and I'll let you handle it, Wade, is building an income floor if you're income protection. Or build in guardrails if you're risk wrap. Wade, you want to chime in on those?
Yeah. So in those years preceding retirement, if you have income protection or risk wrap as a style, you want to assess whether you have an income gap. So after accounting for Social Security, any pensions, do you still have more essential spending that you'd like to have protected beyond those other income sources? So just if I have $40,000 of protected income, I'd like to have $50,000 protected. I've got a $10,000 gap. And with income protection or risk wrap, the way you may prefer to think about filling that gap is with some sort of protected lifetime income, which is available through commercial annuity products in the United States. Yep.
Any questions?
There are a couple more that are still on the theme of investing while we're
All right,
kind of going along here.
knock them out.
So yeah, the next one, I want my investment fund's principal to grow at the rate of inflation and only spend the amount above the inflation return. Do you have any system or strategy to accomplish this?
Okay, where is that? Where are you seeing that, Wade?
I'm still in the live questions. This was asked at 1:21 p.m. from Ron.
Okay, I got you.
I can go ahead and, the basic.
All right, I just start it off and I'll jump in just so I can read it.
Yeah, if you really were strict that you want your investments to grow at least the rate of inflation and only want to spend the amount that exceeds inflation, that's what TIPS do. Treasury inflation
Yeah.
protected securities. If you're getting a 2% real yield plus inflation, that effectively means, without dipping into your principal at all, you could have a 2% distribution rate off of that. And then your nest egg will still grow at the rate of inflation. You're able to spend whatever the TIPS yield is, approximately 2%. And I should actually look up, because I haven't in the last. TIPS
Yeah,
yields
and
are
that
pretty
would be
volatile.
like the Z Bodhi approach, which is what Wade was saying earlier. The only thing is you don't see this a lot in practice simply because folks just don't have this amount of money on them to be able to cover their entirety of their expenses with just tips. You need
Yeah,
to
but
have that
this
market.
question specifically was looking. Oh, it's actually TIPS yields right now are over 2%, so around 2.15 to 2.2%. That would be the distribution rate you could support while still preserving your principal growing at the rate of inflation.
Do you want to? You probably do it eloquently than I am, since you probably explained it before. Do you want to give folks the mechanics on how tips work? Simply because it could be one of those things that we're just throwing terms around.
Yeah, so traditional bonds, you get interest rate, the yield, the coupon rate, and then the yield to maturity. The yield you get out of investing in bonds is not connected to inflation. Say it's 5%. You don't know what your real return will be. The real return is what return do you get above inflation. If you're getting a nominal 5% return and inflation is 1%, you've got a 4% real return. If inflation is 6%, you've got a negative 1% real return. You have a known nominal return. You don't know what the real return would be. In 1997, the US government introduced TIPS, Treasury Inflation Protected Securities, that quote a real rate of return, and then you don't know in advance what the nominal return will be because it's a real rate of return plus the inflation rate. So back to the scenario, if TIPS yields are 2% and inflation is 1%, I'll get 3% for the year. If inflation was 10%, I'll get 12% for the year. It's that real rate of return plus a variable inflation rate. And so that's why the way this question was worded, that's what TIPS are able to do. They're able to preserve the inflation adjusted value of your principal while kicking off right today. If you were to do this today, a yield of around 2.1 to 2.2% real.
Perfect. Wait, can you talk about how the stock market works and what it is?
You have an ownership stake in a company that gives you a promise to receive future profits.
The derivative share of the profits. All right, we got one here. It's investment, so we'll
Yeah.
knock it out. This is George. Thanks, George, for these questions, and these are great questions, by the way. I'm not just saying that.
No one thought you were saying that to be nice, but now that you said it.
I'm not just saying that to be nice. I'm actually a nice guy naturally, so I say that all. No, they're good. They're engaging. So thanks, George. Hey, your views on dividends and capital gains reinvestments for a 74-year-old? Reinvest or take to offset RMDs?
Okay, so we're inside of your IRA at this point, and you're 74, so you are already paying RMDs. Your RMDs are due by December 31st of the calendar year, and they're based on the account balance at the end of the previous year, December 31st of the previous year, divided by an age-based factor, which is connected to your age at the end of the current calendar year. So that's the amount you're required to take out to cover your required minimum distributions. You might want to wait towards the end of the year to take that out. However, there's always a risk that if you pass away in December and you haven't taken your RMD yet, your family has the stress of not only managing everything going on, plus they have to get your RMD out or they're going to get penalized. Although the penalties used to be 50% and they're lower since Secure Act 2.0. Not the end of the world, but generally the point is you don't necessarily want to wait until the end of the year. And so therefore, just the mechanics of it, whenever there's a distribution, a dividend payout on the investments, rather than reinvesting that and then having to sell it again later in the year, you might think about it, okay, whenever there's a dividend payment, I'll take that out. That will help offset RMDs for the year. If all the dividends cover my RMD, great. I don't have to take anything else out. Otherwise, I'll take out the difference later in the year. Yeah, I think that's a fine behavioral, easy way to think about it. Let's just distribute dividends as part of the RMDs for the year. You don't strictly have to do that. You could just reinvest the dividend and then later on sell shares to take the RMD. Either approach works mechanically, but if you're comfortable with the idea of let's take out the dividends to cover RMDs, I think that's a perfectly acceptable approach to do that.
A quick aside here, and not the question, but it's more, you'd be surprised how many times this has come up when clients have transferred over and they thought this is how the game works. But RMDs, you can take out what you need for RMDs, pay the taxes, and you can kind of reinvest it. You know, some folks were like, "Oh, once they take a certain amount out for RMDs, they don't reinvest."
Invest in a taxable brokerage account.
Yeah. Like, just one to grow on. It comes up. It's not like a frequent thing, but it comes up more often than not that folks are unaware that they can reinvest in a taxable thing. You just have to pay the taxes on it, is all.
Yeah, the paying the taxes on it is the annoying part because it may require a bigger distribution than you want to spend. But right, it is important to emphasize you are allowed to reinvest.
Wait, it's happened more than 10 times in the last 10 years where someone just has cash and you ask them why so much. Oh, because I had to take it out. You know, that kind of thing. Oh, this is the question of the day.
Yeah.
I think you've been dreading it.
Yeah, I'm off the wagon on the.
What are we up to as number of push-ups being done in one day?
Yeah,
Wade, why don't you begin it?
I've been a naughty boy. I've not been doing push-ups or pull-ups. I need to get back on track with that.
You stopped? What happened?
Just one of those things.
No, I don't know. I don't know one of those things. What happened?
Bad enough.
Huh?
I didn't want it bad enough, so
no excuse. Your wife wasn't in comment. Hey, Wade, can you pick up this toolbox for me? I can't open this jar of mayonnaise.
I need to display feats of strength.
Well, Jeff, Wade is not alone, but my excuse is, I think, better. It's still an excuse. I had the knee surgery. I've talked about it, the partial knee surgery. And so I did it up until then, which was like 7 weeks ago, I think at this point. And I can't like plank at all. Although the last 2 weeks I've kicked it back up again, but I'm not starting at 100. I'm like at 75. I'll work it back up where I was, and I divide it by 4 and whatever it is, you know, kind of thing. You know, a little less than like 17 or whatever, and then I just top off. But we'll get there, man. We'll get there. All right. Push-ups, I think I maxed out at 8, 9 in a row. I got to work it again. Wade, are you committed to it?
Yeah.
Yes or no? Yes or no, Wade? Yes or no?
At least later in the summer. I may have a gap here still. But
later in the summer. That's a no, everybody. That's a no, everybody. No, that's fine, man. So, Jeff, you went right. You like pierced us right in the heart. You went right for the jugular on that one. Yeah, on the neck at that point.
We need accountability.
Yeah, we need an accountability partner. Can you email this to us every day?
He's asking me, and he's my accountability partner. And
who is?
Jeff, who asked the question.
Yeah, Jeff, we're counting on you now. All right. All right.